What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined once again by Daniel Starkand. A night that we never saw coming, Daniel. The Dodgers blow a 4-run lead to force extra innings late in the game, and they win. Can you believe it? The Dodgers win an extra inning game.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm glad to be back. I feel like it's been a couple weeks here. Hope you're doing well. Hope all the listeners are doing well. But yeah, I'm glad glad I could come back for a win here, and I don't have to be angry over another blown game and a bunch of dumb decisions. But yeah, the Dodgers, they came back. They won. The last time they won an extra inning game was when Corey Seager hit that home run at Petco Park in like the first week of April or whatever it was. They had lost like I think it was like 13 straight since then. So I was honestly just kind of shocked to see that they won. They didn't screw it up somehow. So that was always fun. But yeah, just good to be back overall and glad to be talking about a win.
Yeah, and people point out not only is an extra innings win, it's a 1-run win. Now, they made it a
Yeah.
little interesting. It was a 2-run lead that became a
Yeah.
1-run lead. But as you said, it's good to be back. It's been a couple weeks. I filmed with Matt earlier. I was gone last week. You were at Summer League. So it's good to be back. And we get off to a good start here. 6-5 win. As you pointed out, there's tons to talk about. We've got questions in the chat about the health of guys like Joe Kelly, Scott Alexander, Cole Hamels. We'll get to that. Mookie Betts, obviously a big storyline. There are plenty of Dave Roberts decisions that we can talk about. Some good, by the way, but some not so good. But let's just get into this. The Dodgers win 6-5 in New York. It starts out, it seems like this is going to be a fairly straightforward game. Corey Seager, RBI double in the first. Will Smith sac fly in the third. Sac fly for Trey Turner in the fourth. Billy McKinney sac fly in the sixth. All of a sudden, it's 4-0. Julio Urias is cruising. The Dodgers seem like they're well on their way to a comfortable victory. There's chances there. They leave some guys, they leave some runs out there, but hey, the sacrifice flies. They're putting the ball in play. They're scoring runs. And then all of a sudden, the seventh happens, and it's an absolute disaster. Brusdar Graterol starts the inning with the pair of strikeouts, gives up the double before he's pulled. Brule comes in, single, walk, wild pitch, walk, single. He comes out. Trinan comes in, pass ball, walk, and a pop out. 6 consecutive 2-out base runners. All of a sudden, the game is tied. The Dodgers, Trinan gets through the 8th. The Dodgers bring Jansen in through the 9th. He forces extra innings because of, as we'll talk about, the Dodger bullpen was an absolute disaster just from a pitch count perspective, which goes back to why Julio Urias pitched as little as he did. But again, we'll save some of that.
Yeah.
We get to extra innings. You have no idea who's going to pitch for the Dodgers in the bottom of the 10th. But all you care about is making sure that they score. Will Smith gets 2 strikes on him. The nightmare reel starts playing in my head of, oh my gosh, he's not even going to move this guy over. Something bad's going to happen. The exact opposite. Bill smashes the ball into left field. Dodgers take a 2-run lead. They can't add on. And Kenley Jansen, 11 pitches in the 9th, comes back for the 10th. Deep fly ball to center field on the first batter. That's fine. Walks J.D. Davis. Not so fine. Villar grounds out. All of a sudden, the tying run is in scoring position because, of course, it is. Of course, Kenley Jansen makes things interesting. They walk McCann to get to the backup catcher, who I've never heard of, which I always say, if I haven't heard of you, it's a good idea to intentionally walk to get to him. First pitch, pop up to left field. The Dodgers win 6-4. So let's start with the Dodger offense. It was dormant last night in a 2-1 loss. It comes back tonight. It felt like an average baseball game where this is what the Dodgers should be able to do, even without their best offensive performance. They just move guys over. They get extra base hits. They put sac flies together. Until they blew that, the 4 runs, it felt like, okay, these are the types of games Dodgers should win.
Yeah, and I'm right with you there. I was gonna say it was a good but not great offensive performance, which means like you should be able to replicate that just about every night. But yeah, they were doing a lot of the stuff that they haven't done all year. You mentioned the sac flies, moving runners over, stuff like that, which that helps you win baseball games. Like I feel like they honestly could have scored a lot more. They didn't really truly get that big hit until Smith's home run, obviously. But I feel like there were some innings where they get a guy or two on, and maybe they'd get 1 run, but they never had that big inning. They were just kind of like chipping,
Yep.
scoring 1 run here, 1 run there, and honestly that kind of adds up. Like they ended up with 6 runs, which is on most nights that's enough to win. And the 4 runs honestly would have been enough if it wasn't for that wild 7th inning
Yeah.
that had some luck involved, some stupidity involved, kind of all the above there. But yeah, I'd say it was a good but not great performance from the offense, which I mean, you'll take that, especially when you talked about yesterday what we saw. Feel like the Dodgers offense is either super hot or super cold. So it's nice to kind of get a game like in the middle for
Yeah, I
once.
think Joe Davis quoted this stat. I believe after tonight, the Dodgers are now 55-14 when they score 4 or more runs. So obviously, they needed more than four in this one. The four that they originally put up did not hold up, but that just goes to show you. I mean, four is the National League average, 4.4 is the National League average. So it shows you how good the Dodger pitching has been, both from the starters and from the relievers. Just get to 4 runs, and they're going to win a lot of baseball games. Tonight they do, thankfully. On the pitching side, let's talk about Julio Urias. And again, we'll get to some of the Dave Roberts decisions. Urias, 5 innings, 2 hits, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. He throws 57 of 82 pitches for strikes. Before we get into the decision to pull him, it felt like one of those games where his strikeout stuff wasn't necessarily working early on. I don't think he got his first strikeout until the 3rd inning, but then it seemed like he
Yeah.
was getting better the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. What did you see out of Urias tonight?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty good. I mean, he worked that pitch count up a little more than you'd like, which is kind of what part of the reason why he came out. We'll get into all of that, but yeah, he had the changeup working, which he was getting some ground balls on. Which I mean, that's you're not mad at that. Like ideally, you want a little more swing and miss, like you said, through the first 3 innings or whatever. He only had one strikeout, but it's not like he was giving up hard contact. It was a lot of soft contact, so you're okay with that. And like you said, he kind of started finding the swing and miss stuff in the later innings. He had that the outside corner that the ump was giving him a couple inches there. He got a couple strikeouts off that, which was good. So I'd say overall it was a really good outing from him. He got into that one jam that he got out of. I think it was in that 5th inning. So good on him for that. I mean, I don't know what more we could ask of this guy. Like he's been pretty incredible all year. It seems like he had that one little rough patch kind of in the middle of the year, but then he came out of that and he's been as good as ever over the last month or two. So he's been huge for this team. I'd say you needed a little more length from him today, but that wasn't really his fault. But just with all the bullpen games recently, with the rain delays in Philly and such, you wanted a little more length. But I'd say overall, him not giving up any runs, that's definitely a
Yeah,
positive.
and let's go into the decision to take him out. So the Dodgers are up 4-0. His spot in the order comes up. It seems like there's a little weirdness with Matt Beatty about whether or not Dave Roberts actually wanted him to hit. It's unclear, although the one
Yeah.
thing that did seem clear is that it felt like Urias was coming out no matter what. Whether or not they wanted Urias to bat for himself or whether they were going to try somebody else, whatever. Beatty goes up. They pull Urias, 82 pitches, 5 innings. The Dodgers are winning 4-0. The sort of natural argument that you sort of make in your head is, this is a guy, as Kirsten Watson pointed out, he's well above his career high for innings. They're looking for opportunities to rest his arm a little bit. My
Hmm.
question is, was this the right time to do that? Yes, it's a 4-0 game. I'm not even talking about playing the results and what ended up happening. I'm talking about the
Right.
last 3 games. This is what they got from their starters. Max Scherzer, 3 1/3. Then there's a rain delay. The next game, you've got David Price. He gives you 4 innings. The following game, you have Mitch White. He gives you 4 innings. So you've got 3 consecutive bullpen games, essentially, leading up to this one. You know that the starting rotation isn't necessarily like fully set. You're going to have more and more of these bullpen games. What was your take in the moment? Again, I'm not trying to play the results of what happened, but now you go down the road and Bickford wasn't available, Vesia wasn't available. The guys that they did have available, what did you think at the time of Urias? And folks joining us on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, YouTube as well. Chat. I'd love to hear your thoughts. In the moment, Urias done after 5. Daniel, what were you thinking?
For me, I didn't really understand it. Like even if forget the whole pinch hitting thing. Like I would have never sent Beatty up there in the first place. I would have stuck with Julio. He's at 83 pitches. You could easily get one more inning there. You just laid out, the overall
Yeah.
state of the bullpen. Like they're pretty taxed. They've been throwing a lot lately. They had some key guys down tonight, so you're not working with a full chest of high leverage guys. Like you have enough relievers to get through the game, but necessarily the guy you trust, right? So and especially it was 4-0 at the time, but you're a couple swings away from that being a one-run game, as we saw, and also a tie game even. So I would have stuck with Julio there for one more inning. I understand the need to limit him. He's reached a career high, blah blah blah. But to me, like you were kind of saying, to me tonight just wasn't the time for
Yeah.
that. Like do it in a game where there's been plenty of games where Julio's been up, like the Dodgers score a lot of runs from him and it's like 7 or 8-0. Like do it in a game like that. I also don't think like taking him out after 5 innings and 83 pitches compared to like 6 innings and 100 pitches, like in the overall grand scheme of things, like there's really no difference
Yeah.
there. Like 15 pitches isn't gonna make or break, his health, I'd say. So I would have tried to get one more inning out of him. You never know how he's gonna pitch in that inning. Of course, like he got out of a jam in the fifth, so I guess it would be kind of send him out there for the sixth and kind of see how it goes. But I definitely would have sent him back out
Yeah, a
there.
couple interesting thoughts. Some folks are pointing out. Lots of people saying, hey, we wanted one more inning. Steven, too, points out Urias did get hit on the leg by a pitch, so unclear whether or not that might have played a role in this, just how much. I mean, it did look good. It kind of caught him on the flesh of his calf, and so it did feel like,
Yeah,
maybe that's not, but who knows? I mean, that could knot up and start to tighten up, so maybe that's a piece of it. The second thing is
possible.
somebody pointed out just he looked tired. You look at the weather in New York. I mean, even Jansen, Urias, both those guys looked. There was sweat, like the humidity. I mean, right now, like today in New York, the high is 93 with the humidity right now about 70%. So even right now, it feels like 90 degrees. So it's possible that plays a factor into it, that maybe he was just laboring. You mentioned he did have the one inning that was difficult, and that was the inning that kind of came towards the end of his stretch there. So all of these things are possibly in play. But that said, it felt like the only way you pull him after 5, if this game was out far enough out of reach, where this was hand the ball to Edwin Uceda and say, I need 6
Exactly.
pitches, I need 6 outs, I need 9 outs, just save the pen.
Exactly.
If 4-0 wasn't there, clearly because of what happened next. So they pull Urias. The next guy is Corey Knebel. And if we're going to say something positive about the bullpen, Corey Knebel looked good tonight, touching 97. Really
Yeah.
impressive stuff for him. I actually had the same thing written for Brusdar Gratterall, which, again, I guess is probably still fair. This is a guy that the issue has been strikeouts. He has 2 strikeouts the other night. Now he has 2 strikeouts in this game. He does give up the double. And again, a questionable decision, I think, from Dave Roberts here to pull Gratterall. Now, you can't assume what's going to happen next. And again, this is one of those where you play things backwards. But he threw 26 pitches 2 nights earlier. Gratterall did. He throws just 9 pitches, strikeout, double. Roberts pulls him for Brule. Again, I'll ask you, in the moment, the decision to take Gratterall out of the game, did you have any issues with it? It's 4-0. It's the bottom of the 7th. There's 2 outs. There's 2 lefties coming up. They bring in Brule, their lefty. He's the only lefty they have available in the bullpen.
To me, this made even less sense than taking Julio out. I guess they wanted to go to the lefty-lefty matchup, but honestly, like Dom Smith was the guy at the plate, and Joe Davis had just told us the at bat before that Dom Smith actually has reverse splits. Like he's hit lefties better than righties this season. So I'm not sure like what kind of advantage you're getting there, especially when a guy like Gratterall, who, as you just mentioned, that was maybe the best he had looked all year. Like he comes in and strikes out the first 2 guys, gives up a double, so what? It's still a 4-run game at that point. It's not like that was the tying run at second base. And the guy you're going with, it's not like you're going with an established lefty like a Vesia or a Victor Gonzalez or whatever. You're going with a guy, Justin Brule, who just got called up the other day and kind of came out of nowhere. Like he doesn't even have much of a prospect pedigree. So that to me was probably the most questionable decision of the night. So I mean, I will say though, Brule didn't pitch all that bad.
Yeah.
Like he kind of got screwed by a couple of bloopers there that fell in. But I'd say Gratterall at 9 pitches, like why not let him face at least one more batter and see what happens?
Yeah, and you say this was the worst decision. I've got a worse decision coming for you in this stretch of decisions from Dave Roberts here. But to your point, they bring Brule in. You've got lefty. Now, Alonso is the 3rd batter, and Brule is going to have to face him if things get hairy. The flip side is you weren't going to bring Brule in a batter earlier after Gratterall strikes out 2 guys. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. As we saw, the guys that they had left in the bullpen were limited. So for me, Gratterall's the guy you leave in there because you take your chances with Gratterall over Brule. They decide to go with Brule. As you say, bloop single, walk, wild pitch. Then that brings up Pete Alonso. Alonso's the 3rd batter. He intentionally walks Pete Alonso after the wild pitch. Makes perfect sense to me. You don't want to mess around with Pete Alonso in that situation. This is the part to me that was the big mistake. They left Brule in for another hitter in this inning. Now, someone pointed out, I think it's Chad Moriyama, I tweeted out, like, what is going on? And he said, well, maybe Trinant wasn't ready. If Trinant's not ready, that remains Dave Roberts' fault. That remains Mark Pryor's fault. That remains the Dodgers' fault. And to their point, Trinant did not even get up to warm until Alonso came up to the dish. So, like, I don't know what Dave Roberts was planning for. Alonso comes up. Roberts then starts trying and warming. Brew's first pitch to Alonso is a wild pitch to the point that they just say, forget it, intentionally walk him. So, whether they still like the lefty here after Brule had gone single, walk, wild pitch, intentional walk, or whether Trinan wasn't ready, either of those two decisions, in my estimation, are on Dave Roberts. He leaves him in. McNeil, again, we want to talk about lucky, unlucky, another 70-mile-an-hour bloop single, 2 runs.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's a problem. Trinan comes in. He throws a pass ball. This one was all on Will Smith. Should have caught it. Didn't catch it. Run scores. Walk and a pop out. 6 consecutive base runners reach with 2 outs. And the whole thing's a cluster. You know, again, Trinan is probably the only guy here who is without blame. But, I mean, Brule didn't pitch very well. And Dave Roberts completely mishandled the McNeil. That was the one to me. I couldn't believe, like, this guy, he's a lefty. I get it. But he's one of your worst pitchers. And you're leaving him in the biggest spot of the game rather than Trinan.
Right.
I would have rather said, even if you say, Jeff, you could bring Trinan into this spot, but then you don't get him for the 8th, I'll take my chances with Uceda or whoever else in the 8th of a 4-2 game rather than leaving Trinan in. 4-1, excuse me. 4-1 before the McNeil bloop. So that was the biggest mistake to me.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thought process there, I guess, is the same as bringing in Brule in the first place. Like, you want the lefty-lefty matchup, but at a certain point, do you want the lefty-lefty matchup with your 10th best reliever, or do you want just your best overall reliever in there in the biggest spot of the game? So yeah, that definitely was a questionable decision. Like you said, they had just walked Alonso, so it's not like the 3-batter rule like was in play there. He had faced his 3 batters, and also, so like you said, like if Trinan's not ready at that point, that's also on Dave Roberts, because he should have had him up even sooner, knowing that you're bringing in a guy with not a lot of experience, a runner or 2 on base or whatever. Like, we need to have someone ready in case this goes south pretty quick, which it did.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, a 4-0 game becomes a 4-4 game. And I can't imagine there are many Dodger fans that were feeling positive about how this was going to play out at that moment in time, right? Because at the end of the day, you have watched this team seemingly lose the most heartbreaking games time after time.
Yeah.
They lose 1-run games. Now, all of a sudden, it's the end of the 7th and it's tied. You're already looking ahead to extra innings where we know the Dodgers are a mess. And on top of that, like, the whole problem, on top of that was just the state of the bullpen. As I mentioned, Vesia was out. Bickford had pitched 3 nights in a row, someone pointed out to me on Twitter. So the guys that were left were one guy who neither of us really knew was on the Dodgers / was in the major leagues, a guy by the name of Connor Green. No disrespect to Connor Green. Combined with Edwin Uceda. So it's 2 guys with ERAs like over 7.5, and Kenley Jansen. So that brings us to Kenley Jansen, because he's one of the major storylines of this one. He comes in the 9th, and I'm on Twitter sort of thinking out loud, verbally processing here a little bit and saying, is this the right decision? Do you bring Jansen in for the 9th? Knowing that most likely you then have to go to either Green or Uceda in the 10th with the runner on, or do you bring Green or Uceda on in the 9th and then take your chances with Jansen, knowing that you want your better reliever with a guy on second? They decided to go with Jansen, which was the right decision. The Mets had 3 of their best hitters, basically, Smith, Nemo, and Alonso due up. Jansen makes quick work of them. Great stuff from him. Obviously, Will Smith comes up, hits a 2-run home run to lead off the 10th. And then there's the decision of Uceda is warming up. Jansen, what are you going to do? They decide to go back to Jansen. He makes things interesting, but at the end of the day, 6 huge outs from Kenley Jansen securing this win. It is 6-5, not 6-4, but it doesn't matter. It's a win. So Kenley Jansen, the first inning was great. The second inning was a little dicier, but at the end of the day, he gets the job done for the Dodgers.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the order of how they went to relievers. You tweeted about this as well, and I get your thought process. Like, ideally, you save your better relievers for extra innings when there's, you know, a runner on second base that you have to deal with and potentially a 1-run lead, or as opposed to, you know, a tie game in the 9th inning. But I think kind of the way we saw this play out is why you go to your best guy first. Like, you hope Kenley could go in the 9th and shut it down 1, 2, 3 quickly, so that if you score in the 10th, you could just send him back out there for another inning and not even have to deal with Uceda and Green and whoever else was available back there. There weren't many options. So I think I David's credit for that, I guess. Like we've been picking on him a lot here, and I say rightfully so. But I think this decision, I think it made sense to go to Kenley in the ninth there, just for the exact reason that we saw
Yeah,
play out.
somebody pointing out on YouTube, and I don't know if you've seen this. I haven't been able to be checking Twitter. Somebody did point out that Urias made a comment that he wasn't planning on pitching the sixth inning, but that they were going to send him up there to save the pinch hitter, Matt Beatty, for later on in the game.
Okay.
That's what it seemed like to me. I'm not sure if this person pointing this out on YouTube is actually accurate. I'll take your word for it. I don't have any reason to believe it. And at the end of the day, it didn't matter because they left Albert Pujols on the bench, so it's not like they ran out of pinch hitters, although Dave Roberts has been known to do that. Obviously, Justin Turner seemingly not available, but taking up a roster spot made that a little bit difficult. So those are the decisions there. Why Julio was taken out, a lot of people asking, for those just joining us. The best explanation we can come up with is that this is an attempt to limit his innings, knowing that he has blown past his career high, and just to get him a little bit shorter outings when they can to preserve his arm for later in the season. Neither Daniel or myself believes that to be the right decision. Neither of us believes that to be the right move in this instance, especially in a game where the lead is just 4 runs. But that's the decision the Dodgers make. And again, the bullpen is the one to blame. Dave Roberts is the one to blame for how things played out in the 7th inning. Thankfully, though, at the end of the day, the Dodgers win 6-4. So before we get into some mailbag questions, talk a little bit about Mookie Betts and that kind of thing, let's do player of the game. Lots of people to choose from, actually, surprisingly, in a game like this. But when you think of player in the game, I do think, obviously Urias is an option. Jansen is an option. Daniel, when you think Will Smith, obviously, is there somebody that jumps out to you as player of the game when you think about this one?
The exact 3 names I was thinking of. I'm gonna go with Will Smith just because he hit the game-winning homer. Yeah. It's hard to not be the player of the game when you win the game. But I think Kenley also deserves a lot of recognition here. Like for him to come in and go two scoreless innings, I don't think he's done that maybe all year, but it's definitely been a long time since he's gone to 2 full innings. So that was a big outing for him. Obviously, they staked him a 2-run lead, which is better than a 1-run lead when there's a runner on second. I know that run came in to score, but I think overall it was a pretty solid outing for him. And just for him to come and shut down the door in a close game like that, we know how much the Dodgers have struggled in close games. That was huge.
Yeah, Jonathan Robinson's got Jansen. Paul Vaughn's got Kenley Jansen, and then we've got Craig, Andrew, and Ryan all with Will Smith. Big Show says Will Smith as well. And Ryan also points out a great crowd in New York, which obviously, aside from the laser incident in Max Muncy's face, it was fun to hear. You could feel the energy building as they tied that game at 4, and obviously to come out the other side, I can appreciate it a little bit. Ty Zero says Familia deserves player of the game for his performance, giving up the home run to Will Smith. A couple other guys of note: Chris Taylor, 3 for 5 in this game. He was the only guy to have 3 hits. Max Muncy had 2 hits himself. Corey Seager, Chris Taylor, and Max Muncy all had doubles. And then, of course, Will Smith had the home run. In the bullpen, Corey Knebel, not the player of the game, but I thought he looked good. Obviously, Gratterall, we both thought looked good. Treinen, and he gets 4 outs for the Dodgers. Obviously, Jansen gets the 6, but Treinen gets 4. So good stuff there. But I think I'd go with Jansen. I just think this is a guy who's been through a lot. And you could see the sweat coming. I mean, it must have been hot and humid there.
Yeah.
And so in that
situation,
to throw as many pitches he did, obviously it's immediately stressful because of the runner that's starting on second base. And after facing the 3 best hitters in the first inning, I mean, he goes through the heart of the lineup and gets through it. So I think Jansen is the player of the game there. Will Smith, those would be the 2, I think, best options. So let's see. Laura says Will Smith. Yeah, Laura. Yeah. So I mean, lots of options here. I think it's Smith or Jansen are your 2 choices.
It was an overall team win.
Yeah, Smith with the ball that goes through his glove, I think would be the one blemish on his record here, right? Fair.
Yeah, he made up for it though. I think it was funny. Ian Chin, the guy who created Dodger Blue, he tweeted after Smith drops that ball, he tweeted like something about how Austin Barnes wouldn't have dropped that ball, and then Smith hits the home run, and then he quote tweets it and says, but Barnes wouldn't have hit that home run either. So I guess it's a little bit of give and take there. I will say Smith overall has been a lot better defensively this year, but yeah, that was one little miscue. It happened in a big spot, but he made up for it with the 2.
Yeah, Ian was notoriously silent on the Austin Barnes attempted sacrifice bunt there. So I mean, I think Austin was trying to up his launch angle and exit velocity there with the bunt. But who knows? Um, More votes for Kenley Jansen, player of the game as well. So let's do this. One of the other big storylines that came out today for the Dodgers was the news about Mookie Betts. We know that he was added to the injured list. We know that he's been dealing with hip injury. I believe today it came out that that it's bone spurs. What have you heard as far as the Mookie Betts hip news, injury, and what the Dodgers might expect in the near future as far as his commitment, or not commitment, his contributions go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know a whole lot about bone spurs, but it's obviously not ideal. This is something that Mookie's been dealing with for a while now, and it's been kind of on and off. It's been nagging. He's been able to play through it a lot of the time, but the fact that they finally went ahead and put him on the IL just kind of goes to show, what condition he's in. Like, he's one of the toughest guys in the
Yeah.
league. Like, if he can play through it, he will. And honestly, before he went on the IL, like, he was still mashing. I think it was more just like the running that was bothering him. He played a little second base there for a while to kind of not run as much. But obviously, we know with Mookie that didn't work because he's just diving all over the place at second base anyway. But yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how long it's going to be. I think part of the update was that he's not, the pain has kind of subsided a little, which I think is a positive sign. But I think with hip, like, usually with hip or back injuries, like, the only real like cure is just to
Yeah.
rest it, which means you can't do anything, which is unfortunate, especially when you're in the middle of a pennant race here. But that's just kind of what has to be done. So hopefully he could kind of just take a break for a couple weeks here. The pain will go away, and he'll be back maybe, at the beginning of September or whatever, because Lord knows this team is going to need him. We got a close race here. We're 5 games back, and we'll see what the Giants do tonight. I think they're winning right now, which isn't
Yeah.
great.
Hey,
But
4.5 games
you know,
back at the moment, I believe, right, Daniel? 4.5.
yeah, for the next hour, yeah.
Hey,
But hey, this team is gonna need Mookie. I know, obviously, they picked up Trey Turner, and he's been a godsend. He's been everything we had hoped for and more. But the lineup still isn't quite the same without Mookie in there, especially the way he was hitting
yeah.
before he got hurt, because he was on fire coming out of the
Yeah,
All-Star
and
break.
Justin Turner going down simultaneously also hurts because they
Yeah.
were about to get to a point where you have too many guys, and does Cody Bellinger get taken out of the lineup? And instead, we get a lot of Billy McKinney in his place. So just looking at the Alden Gonzalez story, Mookie Betts received an injection that helped alleviate the pain in his right hip. He is currently not partaking in any physical activity. Roberts reveals that it was a bone spur. Dodgers hoping to put off any surgical procedure until the offseason. Roberts' quote, "They are trying to get him back to us and through the rest of the season. Once we get to the offseason, we'll address that." And so, I mean, when you hear all of this, and when he went back on the injured list, my immediate thought was, I think it's in play that Mookie Betts doesn't come back for the Dodgers. I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not saying I'm counting on that. But I think when
Yeah.
you hear, hey, all they could do is rest it, and then it was so bad that he had to go back to the injured list, this is a guy that they have a 10-year commitment made to. So this isn't a situation where the Dodgers are going to be in any rush to risk permanent injury, as good as this roster is, that kind of thing. I'm not saying they're going to play it super, super safe. I'm just saying if they have to decide on risking long-term injury to a guy that they owe like $300 million to over the next 8 years, it is not wise to just say, screw it, we're going to go for it this year, especially given the circumstances. And so, am I crazy? Like, did that thought cross your mind that we might have seen the last of Mookie Betts in 2021? Again, this isn't me
Yeah.
reporting anything. This is me just
Yeah.
reading the tea leaves and putting dots together.
Yeah, I mean, the the thought definitely crossed my mind. I mean, anytime you talk about having, he's going to need surgery in the offseason, that means that, it's not going to go away, So even if he rested for a couple weeks, it may get to the point where, the pain has subsided to the point where he could play through it and manage it, maybe have a couple days off a week so he could get some sort of
Yeah.
rest. But anytime you even mention the possibility of off-season surgery, that just means that it's not going away. That means that it's serious enough to the point where you're going to have surgery, obviously. So yeah, I definitely think that's a possibility. I know that Mookie's going to do whatever he can to be back there. He's as tough and competitive as they
Yeah.
come. But obviously at a certain point you can't play through it, as we're seeing right now. Like, he tried to, and he did pretty well for a while. But if it's getting worse and worse, like you said, this is the future of the franchise here. You got him for another decade. You definitely don't want to risk something even more severe than what he's dealing with. So I think it just comes down to if he's able to manage the pain or not, which I guess we just gotta wait and see if it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And just speaking of injuries, just looking through the injured list tonight, we're talking about the relief pitchers the Dodgers have available. Well, here's why the Dodger bench and bullpen was so short. You've got Scott Alexander, who's been on the injured list with left shoulder inflammation since July 20th. Jimmy Sherfy is on the 60-day injured list with an elbow injury. That was as of August 1st. Victor Gonzalez, 10-day injured list as of August 6th. Jimmy Nelson, of course, out for the year as of August 6th. They add Cole Hamels, but Cole Hamels is not going to be expected to contribute until September as he builds himself up. Darian Nunez, 10-day injured list as of August 7th. August 8th, Garrett Clevenger, 10-day injured list. Gavin Lux, 10-day injured list on the same day. Danny Duffy gets added. He's on the injured list. He's on the 60-day IL. Clayton Kershaw on the 60-day IL. Joe Kelly out. You can put the pieces together and read between the lines on why Joe Kelly might be out, but he's been out since August 10th. And then obviously Tony Gonsolin as well, out as of began a throwing program recently. So you put all those you just read those names off and it's like Alexander, whatever, but then it's like Nunez on the 7th, Clevenger on the 8th, Kershaw on the 9th, Kelly on the 10th. I mean, those are, not to mention Duffy, the guy you trade for, in Hamels. Those are 4 straight days where you lose a pitcher to the injured list. Gonsolin on the injured list in there somewhere as well. The flip side is, if you want to be optimistic, which I tend to be optimistic, Vesia looks amazing. Corey Knebel looked amazing. Kenley Jansen looked good tonight. Blake Treinen continues to look good. Gratterall has looked as good as he has all season. So there is some optimism amidst all of this, even though you still have Uceda and Connor Green and some of these guys floating around the bullpen.
Yeah, and you forgot Phil Bickford, who's just
my guy.
Yeah, so I feel like the bullpen's just been kind of a revolving door, especially as of late. You just mentioned that's like a roster move every day, it feels like, and some guys are guys we haven't even heard of. Like you tweeted about Connor Green or whatever, and I was like, who's that? Like I have no idea who some of these guys are. So I mean, I think the positive thing is that outside of Jimmy Nelson, like none of those are really season-ending injuries. So those are guys you are expecting to get back at some point, whether it be in the next week, whether it be in the next month, before the postseason, whatever. Like it's kind of varying with all these guys. But, if you could get some of these guys back, the overall state of the bullpen, I think right now is pretty good. Especially, like you mentioned, Vesia has really come on. Gratterall has looked better as of late. And just, the overall high leverage guys that we already know about. So I think, you just kind of hoping and waiting for some of these guys to come back because how good they can be, when they do come back.
Ty Zero asks, is the Dodgers training staff basically to blame? You just have to remember the bizarre last 18 months that we've dealt with. And there isn't a manual on how to handle the situation of getting warming down, getting back up, 60-game season, the COVID, the whole thing. Like, it's such a mess. And so, it's not to say you expected it to be this bad, but all these pitchers with shoulder injuries and elbow injuries, it's not surprising when you think of the just completely blowing up of their routines that we experienced in the last 18 months. One other point, iRay2000 says, the Dodgers would be dead if not for organizational depth. And I do think that is worth pointing out. That's one thing that I've kind of tried to tell people, anybody who's critical of Andrew Friedman, the one thing the Dodgers have been excellent at is building organizational depth. Now, this year is the first year where offensively you could push back on that because the Billy McKinneys, the DJ Peters, who homered tonight for Texas, but the Sheldon Noiseys, those Zach Rex, Luke Raley, those types of guys have been miserable. I mean, the Dodgers can't find that spot in the lineup to save their life. Zach McKinstry hasn't been there. Gavin Lux has struggled. He's coming back soon, but those types of guys, Yoshi, Satsugo, I don't know why he's not up. I don't understand the Billy McKinney thing. We could talk about that in a moment, but the point is, offensively, they haven't. Pitching-wise, they find Phil Bickford. They have Vesia, who they acquired in the trade for Dylan Floro. So they are able to find these pieces. Darian Nunez, guys that they just have thrown in. Now, you can't really credit organizational depth with everything because a lot of these guys like Connor Green and Jimmy Sherfy and Jake Reed, those are guys that are just picking up off the scrap heap. Bickford was the same thing. So it's kind of both organizational depth and some credit to Andrew Friedman for finding warm bodies that are actually usable, at least from a pitching perspective. It's just interesting they haven't been able to replicate that on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I also think Friedman deserves some credit for kind of realizing that that depth hasn't been as good this year, which is why we've seen them
Yeah.
make so many moves and go out and pick up guys off the street or whatever. Because he sees the same stuff we see. Like he saw. For a large portion of the year, like Dennis Santana and Uceda and those guys weren't getting it done. So that's why he goes and picks up a Bickford. That's why he goes and picks up, Jake Reed, who was here for a little while, Jimmy Sherfy, all those guys who will they be something? No, but you're at least trying. Like if they suck, you could always just DFA them and then you're right back where you were. And then if you look on the position player side, like I think like you mentioned, all the guys they've been
Yeah.
awful, but credit to Freeman, he goes and picks up Albert
Yep.
Pujols. He goes and makes the big blockbuster deal to bring in Trey Turner, which looking at the team now, like without Mookie and Justin Turner being hurt and all those other guys being hurt, like what would they do without Trey
Yeah.
Turner right now? And that at the time, like it's not like we're sitting here at the trade deadline saying they need to add a huge impact back. Like we're focused on the pitching staff mainly. So credit to Freeman for going out and making that move, because that's looking like a necessity more than a luxury right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ryan asked, do you think the depth in the system is in question because of the reliance on guys like Noisy? I think offensively, the Dodgers took a calculated gamble this year by letting Jock Peterson go, by letting Kike Hernandez go. They were calculating that they could bet on Zach McKinstry and Gavin Lux to be contributors. And they were also betting on, we have 5 lottery tickets sitting in AAA, none of whom we trust completely. But can we get something out of Noisy and Rex and Rayleigh and Peters? And unfortunately, the answer has been no. You cannot get anything out of any of those guys. And so it's the first time that the Dodgers feel like there's a little bit of a gap between the major league level and guys that are sitting at AA. It's a conversation you and I have both had with Justin Lorber at times, where it's not to say that the Dodgers farm system is depleted. It's just things sort of ran their course, and there's now a little bit of a gap between the guys that are in AA and AAA and major league level. The AAA level has been hurting as far as guys that could come in and contribute. And so I don't, obviously Andrew Friedman took a calculated risk on that front is the language I would use. And it's backfired because none of those guys worked out. Now he goes and gets Pujols to salvage it a little bit. And of course, injuries. I mean, should Andrew Friedman have predicted all of the injuries that the Dodgers have dealt with? Bellinger, Seager, McKinstry, Lux, Justin Turner, Mookie Betts. Like, should he have predicted that because of the weird year? I mean, maybe to some degree. I've said on this show, pushing back a little bit, I don't think the Dodgers have been more unlucky than anybody else injury-wise. I know it feels like that, and maybe the last 2 weeks have changed that a little bit. But everybody's dealing with injuries. A lot of teams are having to navigate this with some of their best players. You could argue the Dodgers have been on the more intense side, but it's not. I wouldn't say that's the biggest reason why the Dodgers are where they are. I think there's some poor decisions Dave Roberts has made. Cody Bellinger's been not very good, and just some poor luck, however you want to play it out. But it's an interesting thing to think about when you think about where the prospects are and where the Dodgers have been. So
yeah, and just real quick, one other guy that we haven't even mentioned when it comes to position players is Edwin Rios. Like, obviously, he was really bad to start the year, and then we found out why he had I think it was a shoulder or whatever. He had an injury that put him out for the year. But coming into the year, like coming off of last year and the year before, that was a guy who you think could be really reliable off your bench. He could play a couple positions. He could hit home runs. Like that's another guy that you were counting on coming into the year that essentially gave you nothing. So that kind of you lose some depth there. And like you mentioned, the guys you're calling up just aren't performing. Like as bad as it's been, it's hard to put it all on Freeman just because it feels like he's like tried everything at this point, and he's figured out most of it. Like if you look at if the Dodgers could just get Turner and Mookie back, like their bench is still not bad, and Lux of course as well. Their bench isn't bad by any means, but it's just tough when so many of those guys are all down at once, and now you're just saying, hey, like who do we got left?
Yeah.
Like, who can we bring up here that could give us some sort of contribution? And honestly, the answer this year has been no one really.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get to some questions here. If you've got questions for us, throw them in the chat. There's a couple that have come in the last few minutes we'll start with. I thought this was a good one. JDS the third. Can the Dodgers win it all if Kershaw and Mookie are both hurt? Or do they have enough talent remaining? And I'll take a shot at this one, and I'll say yes, and here's why. Because we thought they could win it all with Mookie and Kershaw. And if both of those guys are out and they get replaced by Scherzer and Trey Turner, then the talent level, you could almost argue, actually increases, because of depending on how big of a gap you think between Kershaw and Scherzer. But my answer is yes. Now, that's assuming we were assuming sort of a healthy and productive Bellinger, a healthy and productive Turner, and who knows
Right.
with the rest. But I would say, yes, they can do it without Kershaw and Mookie because the talent they have, the offensive lineup that they can put out, even without Mookie Betts, and the rotation they can throw out a playoff rotation, even without Clayton Kershaw, is still arguably the best. Now, would they be the favorites? I don't know, but they'd be close.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was just kind of thinking it through my head. Like, if let's say Mookie and Kershaw are out, you still have a starting rotation of Walker Buehler, Max Scherzer, Julio, and then either Price or Hamels as your fourth guy. Which
Or Gonsolin if
it
he's back.
or Gonsolin if he's back and healthy. Yeah. But and if you're talking rotations, that might still be the best in baseball right there. If we're talking about playoff rotations.
Yeah.
And then if you're talking about the lineup, you lose a bench guy, obviously, but you still have a lineup of Trey Turner, Muncy, Justin Turner, Seager, Will Smith, Chris Taylor, Cody Bellinger, AJ Pollock.
Yeah.
That's still a really good lineup. It's just you're losing one of those guys off your bench that you'd have
Yeah.
with Mookie there. But I think if everyone else is healthy, like there's still no holes in that lineup.
Yeah.
Like especially with Bellinger, we're not going to say he totally figured it out, but he's definitely been better over the last couple weeks than he was before that. Well,
low bar.
Low bar. The bar was very low. He's definitely been better. He hasn't been great by any means, but he's showing signs is all I'm saying. Like if that guy's batting 7th or 8th in your lineup, like that's not horrible by any means. So I definitely think they can win it without those two guys. The only problem is like your margin for error becomes a lot lower because now now everyone else needs to stay healthy pretty much. Like if another guy or another two guys go down, then you're kind of talking like, like we're kind of screwed here.
Yeah, because that still leaves you Pujols, McKinstry, Gavin Lux as 3 bats off the bench. Obviously, Austin Barnes is still there, and then Matt Beatty or somebody else. Another question here. This is an interesting one. Ty Zero. Who is the one guy who's currently not injured who would be the biggest negative impact if he were to get injured? So basically, of all the guys who are currently healthy, who's the last one that you would want to see injured? I'm guessing we're both going to say the same player. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean it's the guy they just got. It's Trey Turner for me. Like he kind of sets the table for the lineup. He's got the speed. He's playing great defense. He's the guy with you could afford to maybe lose him if you have Mookie, but with Mookie also out, I don't think you could afford to lose Trey Turner at this point.
See, I was going to go the opposite. I was going to go I was thinking Buehler, obviously Scherzer if we're talking new guys. I think just starting rotation. You laid out the current playoff starting rotation. If Urias is your number 2 guy, and then we're talking Price and Hamels as 3 and 4, that becomes problematic. One of the reasons I would still feel good about a playoff rotation is because essentially if you're in a 7-game series and you're telling me that I'm getting 4 games out of Buehler and Scherzer, plus another 1.5 out of Urias, I feel good about that. If all of a sudden it's 2 out of Scherzer, none out of Buehler, I start to feel a little bit. But I'm with you. I mean, obviously, there's no wrong answer here. I think Trey Turner is the other guy that belongs in that conversation. Max Muncy has been great. I mean, Justin Turner, Corey Seager. There's lots of Will Smith. That might be the biggest drop off. If it's Austin Barnes every night, that might be a tough one. Not to mention the Dodgers don't have a backup catcher because Keibert Ruiz has been tripped out. So
I might have to switch my answer to Will Smith just because of what you just laid out. Also, real quick though, one other pitcher who we haven't really named is Danny Duffy. Like if he's back at some point, if he's your 4th starter, the way he's been pitching this year, obviously he'd have to get built up or whatever, and who knows how long that'll take. But that's another arm that you could at least rely on to get you a few innings, and he's been really good this year. So that I guess that's kind of why I went with the position player. But let's just scrap all that because I'd go Will Smith now that you mentioned it.
Yeah, there you go. Jonathan, when is Dustin May coming back? Unfortunately, not this season.
Maybe not next year either.
Yeah, he's probably going to miss the first half. Probably going to miss the first half of next year as well. We haven't tackled this one in a little while, so we can do it. Kenneth asked, do you think Bauer remains a Dodger if he is not charged with anything? I'll throw a dart at it. I suppose if he ends up getting charged with nothing, MLB will still do its investigation. So this is not entirely based off of whether he is charged. I'm imagining that MLB is going to suspend him at some point for something, and we are late enough in the season that I find it almost impossible to believe that he will pitch at any point this season. I suppose in the event that he is not charged with anything, the Dodgers would have to figure out what to do. Now, would the Dodgers just eat his salary and cut him? Maybe. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities, but I suppose if you want to throw out the speculation of if he is not charged. And again, this is not me or Daniel commenting on whether or not he's guilty or not. We're just saying under the scenario where he's not charged, I think he's suspended. I don't think he pitches this year, but I suppose it's within the realm of possibilities that he pitches next year, although I would say very, very unlikely.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm with you there. I don't really want to rule anything out. Like is being brought up, like it's possible he's completely innocent and he's found with no charges. In that scenario, I guess I could see him coming back. But at this point, it honestly feels like they've moved on. That kind of the Scherzer acquisition for me kind of represented the Dodgers, trying to move on. Like if you're, especially if you're able to extend Scherzer, then you have him for next year or whatever. But it just feels like the Dodgers are distancing themselves from Bauer. They're kind of preparing for the worst here, which I think pretty much with the evidence we've seen already, or like the reports that have come out, it's not looking good. So
Yeah.
I'm under no expectation that he's just going to go to court and he's going to be innocent and everything's going to be fine. I'm not expecting that to happen. It's possible, but I'd say it's a very slim chance he pitches for the Dodgers again.
Yeah, Laura asks, next question here. Cody Bellinger, your thoughts? I don't think you and I are completely different. I think maybe we have slightly different perspectives. I'm just in a place with Bellinger that you need to prove to me that you've gotten over the hump before I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt on any of this. And
Yeah.
I've kind of said he's hit a couple home runs, yes, but the problem is that he just looks like he's swinging for the fences every time. He's late on fastballs. He's 1 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. The thing is the single that he hit was exactly what we're asking for. He sort of choked up on the bat, it seemed like, and just slapped the ball to center. He adjusted to the pitch rather than just trying to swing through everything, and it worked. The flip side is everything to me looks like he's swinging. I know you joked on Twitter, hey, he hit an opposite field home run. My immediate thought was he was late on a fastball. Like it didn't feel like he was trying to go opposite field to me. It just looked like he was late. And again, that could be me just being pessimistic and saying I need to see a lot more out of Cody Bellinger until I give him the benefit of the doubt that he was trying to go the opposite way. But man, the Bellinger offensively, I remain very worried. I would say it's ticked up slightly, but not in any sense dramatically, because every game it feels like you think he's back, and then all of a sudden it's like a 95-mile-an-hour fastball right above his letters that he's like a half second late on and nowhere close to. So for me, I'm pessimistic. I remain skeptical that anything has been fixed. Where are you at on Bellinger as of today?
For me, I think he's making progress. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say he's back.
Right.
Like, we got MVP Bellinger back. We got All-Star back. Like, I'm not at that point by any means. But I think he's definitely making progress. Like we were just talking about, like the bar for him was very low, before these last couple weeks. So he's eclipsed that. But he hasn't been great by any means. But I think, every step forward is a step in the right direction. He seems to be headed that way. With him batting 7th in this lineup or whatever, you don't need him to be an MVP level. You just need him to be productive every now and then. You need him to take good at bats, which we saw. I kind of disagree with you on the Oppo home run, because that was like the 14 pitch at bat or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Belly, he was fouling off some tough pitches, and then he gets a fastball away and he goes with it and lines it over the fence for a home run. So I honestly thought that was his best at bat all year right there.
Totally.
That was probably the most encouraging thing I've seen. But like you said, it's not like it's been great since then. Like he could look phenomenal one at bat and then look like a little leaguer up there, in the next. So I think he's making progress. I'm not ready to declare him back by any means. But hopefully he could just keep moving forward, because like you mentioned, there have been times at this year where he hits a couple homers or whatever, and you're like, all right, he's back. And then the next week he goes 1 for 20 with 10 strikeouts or whatever after that.
Yeah.
So we just got to see more of it at this point.
I think he has like an 8 or 9 game like hitting streak going, and it's all ones.
Yeah.
It's like
it's like
9
1
straight
for
1 for 4s.
5
Yeah,
every day.
totally. A couple more questions here. This is a good one. THP, Bueller on the mound tomorrow. Who's available out of the bullpen? Kenley, he says, I assume Kenley, Trinan, and maybe Knebel aren't. Vesey and Bickford would be back. So, yeah, I would imagine Vesey and Bickford are both back. Kenley for sure down. Trinan, I could see. Trinan did not pitch last night, right? This was he had last night off. Is that right?
I think. I'll check real quick.
Okay.
But he some pitches.
Yeah. So Trinan is just a guy that I feel like they trust a little bit more in long situations.
Mm-hmm.
Knebel's an interesting one coming back from injury. He has yet to pitch. Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. Trinan did not pitch Thursday, so he it would be a second day in a row for him. So he's in theory should be available.
Yeah, so I mean, and now Gratterall has now pitched 2 days in a row.
Two. No, he didn't
No,
pitch
Brule
Thursday
was the
either.
one who pitched 2 days. So Brule is
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Kenley is probably out. Knable, I would
yeah,
guess, is probably out. And then
yeah.
Gratterall, Vesia, Bickford, some of those guys are available for you.
Trinan.
Green, Connor Green is available.
They
Edwin
might
Uceda.
call up another arm, Uceda. I mean,
Well,
they
Uceda's
might
already
call
out there.
someone up. Yeah, yeah, they might. I could see them sending Brule
Brule.
down.
Yeah.
Just because he, like you just said, he's pitched the last 2 days, so they could send him down and bring up a fresh arm probably.
Yeah, this isn't a question. You're reminding me with the sending down. Where are you at on Billy McKinney? Like, is he the best option we have? I mean, I'm not here saying that like Rayleigh or Rex or any of these guys is like noticeably better. It's just fascinating to me. Like,
Yeah.
what did Matt Beatty do? I am one of the low guys on Matt Beatty. What did Matt Beatty do
Yeah.
to be replaced every day in the lineup by Billy McKinney?
Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest. It feels like they're kind of giving like McKinney like a bit of a runway, like, hey, we're gonna play you for a couple weeks here and then kind of see what's what before we make a decision. Just because he's a former, not like top prospect, but he has some prospect pedigree, he has some big league experience, so he isn't just some nobody that they picked up. So they've been giving him a chance, but I think we're at the point where it's been pretty clear that he hasn't really been able to produce much at all. It's not like there's not really anything that he brings to the table that you're like, oh yeah, like he's contributing that. Like the defense hasn't been great. He's not that like he's not out there stealing bases. I don't think he's hit a single home run. So I'm not exactly sure what he's brought to the table. I'm just looking up
I was
Yoshi
gonna say
Tsutsugo's
he was
numbers
tearing
here.
it up at one point.
He's been tearing it up at AAA. He's got an 870 OPS, 10 homers in 42 games, 32 RBIs. So I think it's all pretty much time to bring that guy back up. Like he's kind of similar to McKinney. Like he's not some nobody.
Yeah.
Like he's a guy who once had a lot of promise. He's got big league experience. They kind of brought him in to hopefully make some swing tweaks, and it seems to be working at the AAA level at least. So I think we're probably nearing the end of the McKinney experience. Yoshi, he plays the outfield too, so it's not like a positional type of thing. I think we're almost at the point where we should bring him back up and see what he's got, because it's not like he could do any worse than what you're getting out of McKinney.
Yeah, I think
right
McKinney,
now.
they said, is hitting like 180 since coming to the Dodgers. Yeah, I mean, Yoshi, on one hand, it's a grain of salt. It's AAA. We know those offensive numbers tend to be inflated. And maybe there's a piece of them that sees some roster moves coming and they don't want to have to add him to the roster and then take him off, because if they take him off again, then they would lose him to free agency. But yeah, I mean, it just feels like we're at the point where throw him into the major league level and see what you get. It's not going to be worse than what McKinney has done. Obviously, maybe they like McKinney's defense a little bit more. Yoshi, he doesn't necessarily inspire confidence out in left field, let alone I don't know how you feel about AJ Pollock in right field. So you kind of Pollock is not exactly an elite defender anymore, although he at least was at one point, if you want to feel better. So a couple more questions here. Peter asked about Caleb Ferguson. Ferguson is done for the year as well. He's another one of those guys that you're just hoping is ready by the beginning of next year. A slightly disappointing salad is a YouTube name here. Do you think Ryan Pepio makes his debut this year? I think it's in the realm of possibilities. Not on the 40-man roster, so that would be a potential barrier. Although with all the guys they have, the Brules of the world, I mean, they clearly have some 40-man roster availability. Guys they could easily send down. So I think so. I mean, everything they say is that this guy would probably be one of their best relievers as soon as he came up. So yeah, I mean, when they expand rosters, I would not be surprised at all to see Pepio. You?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And didn't they just called him up to AAA like a couple of weeks ago or whatever too, right? So I mean, that he seems to be on track, at least if he could continue pitching well. Why not give him a shot? Like he's got great stuff. We've seen that changeup he throws. It's not, obviously not on Devin Williams level, but it's a similar type of pitch. It's that dominant of a pitch for him. So I definitely think they'll give him a look. You never know. Like they're high on him long term, so who knows? Maybe he could find lightning in a bottle and be, a quality big league reliever. Which, when you're looking at the end of the bullpen, the Dodgers haven't had a ton of that this year. Like,
Yeah. Okay. Craig asked a question we've touched on briefly at other times. If it comes down to a wild card game, do you want Scherzer or Buehler on the mound?
I said Bueller last time, and I'm gonna stick with that. To me, if when you got any big game, any one game, that's the guy I want, and that would put Scherzer for a game one if you win the wild card game. So it's not like you're dismissing him or anything. Like he's still a big part of what's going on. And honestly, you could even bring him out of the
Yeah.
bullpen if it was really like that dire. I would imagine in a wild card game you'd have all your regular relievers and even Julio probably ready to go out there if needed. But I mean I feel like wild card games are all hands on deck, but I'd go Bueller to start it just because we've seen what he does in big games.
Yeah, I've always been on Team Bueller. I'll be honest, watching Max Scherzer pitch in a Dodger uniform and as good as he has looked,
It's
I'm
pretty
reminded pretty
yeah.
quickly that, he's a close second to Clayton Kershaw as the best pitcher of the last decade and a half. And so it's hard not to say Scherzer there. There's a piece of me that says, hey, if you're trying to re-sign Scherzer, does he take any sort of offense to not being the guy in the wild card game? Not necessarily saying those things should impact there, but I don't think you could go wrong, I guess is where I'll land the plane.
Let me also just point out that like the Dodgers are in a close division race
Yeah.
here, and if they win, if they're in the wild card game, that means they fell short. But that means you're playing important
Yeah.
games up until the last day of the season. So it's not like you're going to be able to rearrange your rotation and have the guy you want in there. Like a lot of it might just come down to whose turn is it to pitch that day, or like who pitched the last regular season game where maybe the division title was on the line or something like that. Like there's going to be important games leading up to it. So in a perfect world, you get to pick which guy you want and have everyone rested and ready to go, but that might not be, reality.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out one other interesting point somebody mentions. I mean, it is the Padres too. So does having a guy like Scherzer, who maybe the Padres haven't seen multiple times as often as they've seen Bueller, is that an advantage in the wild card game where the Dodgers could throw an unfamiliar pitcher? I mean, obviously Scherzer's in the National League, but sometimes, depending on, I haven't looked at the schedule, but sometimes you get to a game like that and they've seen Bueller 4 times or 5 times. Does that matter? I mean, who knows? I don't know if that's a big deal to you or not.
I will say the last time Scherzer pitched against the Padres, he gave up a grand slam to a reliever. So
Fair.
that wasn't his finest performance the last time he faced the Padres.
Fair. DJ Jesse asked about Danny Duffy and his contract situation. A couple people answered he is a free agent at the end of this year. Luis, how long have you guys been live? We're at 56 minutes, so you've only got a few minutes left, but we appreciate you joining us here. Can the Dodgers opt out of Trevor's second and third year? I have no idea what Bauer's contract looks like. I'm not going to pretend to. There's people that say there's moral clauses in there. There's a lot richer people than Daniel and I that are working out the details of that. And so there we go.
I was just gonna say, if he maybe like you said with the moral stuff, like if he's found guilty or whatever, maybe there's like some clause that they could get out of it. But let's say he's found innocent or whatever, they can't just get out of it because technically it's a 3-year contract with that he's got opt-outs after each year, so he could opt out of it. But I don't think the Dodgers could just say no, we're not going to pay you the $45 million we owe you or whatever. But obviously, if there's legal stuff at play here, that goes, like you said, that's beyond our pay grade.
Nomo Fomo's asking Corey Seager in the lineup. How'd you feel about the lineup today? Trey Turner, Max Muncy, Will Smith, kind of at the top. Was Seager fourth, right? So
Seager's fourth.
How'd you feel about that?
I like it that way. I think to me, I like Muncy in that 2 spot just because of how much he walks.
Yeah.
Like I want him getting on base in front of the best hitters, as opposed to, let's say he's batting 4th or 5th and the guys behind him aren't necessarily as good. So I like him there. And Seager is kind of the opposite of that. Like he's ready to attack from pitch 1. He's not really looking to walk. So I'd rather have him batting 4th or whatever, where there might be a couple guys on that he could drive in.
Yeah. Somebody asked about Quackenbush. I believe Quackenbush got DFA'd. So I believe he's no longer with the Dodgers. Ryan asks,
it's the end of the Quack attack.
Yeah. Well, we still have some Oregon Ducks in the system, so we could stay there. But Ryan wants to know who Connor Green is. As I told Daniel, he's from Santa Monica, and he has an ERA of about 11.5 this year. Although, as somebody pointed out, maybe a friend or family member of Connor Green's, he does have a 0.00 ERA in his Dodgers career, which is all of 1 inning. So there you go. Why not Beatty? Yeah, I don't know. Jeff asks, did Dave ever give a reason for the Matt Beatty snafu? Somebody pointed out, again, I'm just quoting somebody here, that Julio mentioned that Julio was going to be coming out of the game regardless, but there was some talk of possibly having Urias go up and hit for himself to preserve the pinch hitter, given that there was nobody on and 1 out. Who knows if that was the case. William asks, why was Julio taken out? William, The short version is we don't know. Both of us disagreed with it. If you want the longer version, in just a moment, you can restart this video and we'll give you about 15 minutes of it early on there. So, well, that's it. That's what we got. Dodgers win 6-5. That's the headline. The Dodgers win 6-5. They win a playoff game, their second playoff victory of the season. Are they 2-12?
Extra inning.
Extra innings.
Not
Sorry,
playoff.
Not playoff. It felt like a playoff game.
2-13.
2-13 in extra innings. They win a 1-run game, which is another sort of issue that they've had of late. So the Dodgers, again, I think this is a stat that Joe Davis mentioned. They're now 55-14 when scoring more than 4 runs. They're currently 4.5 games back, assuming that the Giants haven't won yet, which we just assume that the Giants are going to win because that's all it feels like the Dodgers, the Giants ever do. Win.
Yeah, they're up 5-2 in the 8th. So
there you go.
They're going to take care of that one.
Yeah, with their luck, there's no chance that they blow that. So, anyways, we appreciate all of the questions. We appreciate all of you guys joining us. This was a fun one. I am going to be gone for a few days again next week, and then I'm here for the stretch run. The hope is that we'll have a Dodger Heads to post for you guys on Monday, but stay tuned for details on that. If not, we may be back at the end of next week with a live show, and then we'll be back to kind of full steam ahead, 3 to 4, maybe 5 videos a week. So stay tuned for that. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. Dodgers win 6-5. They beat the Mets in extra innings. Kenley Jansen, 2 innings. Will Smith, game-winning home run in the top of the 10th. Good stuff. Dodgers win, and here's Vin Scully.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.